Imagine two executives are pitching the exact same dismal Q3 numbers to the board of directors.
Oh, that is never a fun room to be in.
Right. It's brutal. The slide deck is identical, the revenue drop is identical, and, the market forecast is the exact same.
The data is just a fixed, unyielding reality at that point.
Exactly. So Executive A finishes their presentation, and by the end of the week, they are quietly asked to clear out their desk.
Ouch. Yeah.
But then Executive B finishes their presentation, and not only do they keep their job, but they are handed an expanded budget to navigate the crisis.
Wait, really? An expanded budget for a terrible Q3?
I know, it sounds crazy,
Yeah.
but the difference wasn't the data. As you said, the data is unyielding. The difference was entirely in the linguistic architecture of the pitch.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, specifically, it came down to a handful of words, like literally 3 or 4 strategically deployed adverbs that completely altered the psychological temperature of the room.
That is fascinating. Just a few adverbs.
Right. And welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled you're here with us today because our mission today is explicitly focused on elevating your spoken and written English.
We want to take it from the merely functional realm to the highly strategic realm.
Precisely. We're looking at this fascinating set of source materials today that essentially acts as, well, the ultimate cheat code for C1 professional communication.
It really is a cheat code.
It is. We are going to unpack a curated collection of 50 essential adverbs, along with the exact microscopic syntactical strategies for deploying them. So, okay, let's unpack this, because traditionally, adverbs get a pretty terrible reputation.
Oh, absolutely. If you've ever taken a creative writing class, the very first rule they drill into your head is...
Kill your adverbs.
Yes. Kill your adverbs. They are dismissed as unnecessary fluff, the crutch of a weak writer.
Right. But in high-stakes professional discourse, they are the very tools that add precision, intensity, and stance.
And crucially, they do that without making you sound overly emotional or subjective. I have to say, that's a brilliant framing of the paradox. Setting the stage, so to speak. We're taught to view them as clutter, yet in a boardroom, they are the steering wheel.
The steering wheel, I love that.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that at a B1 or B2 level of English proficiency, you use language simply to transmit data. The numbers went down.
Functional, utilitarian.
Right. But at a C1 or C2 level, you aren't just transmitting data. You are actively dictating how the listener should feel about that data.
Wow. Okay, yes.
And you're doing it while maintaining an airtight aura of detached, objective authority. It's a sophisticated sleight of hand. You're telling them not to panic, or conversely, you're telling them to pay immediate attention.
But you're doing it through the invisible structural mechanics of the sentence, rather than overtly commanding them.
Hitting the nail on the head, yes.
Which is exactly why Executive B kept their job. They managed the room's anxiety. But I have to ask you about the mechanics of this, because I hear people use adverbs all the time in meetings, and it certainly doesn't sound like a masterclass in persuasion.
No, it usually sounds pretty clunky.
Right. So if these words are so incredibly powerful, what is the actual tangible difference between someone who just sprinkles them into a sentence and someone who wields them strategically? How do we cross that threshold into actual mastery?
Well, the secret to sounding C1 isn't just swapping out basic vocabulary for polysyllabic alternatives. You can't just use bigger words.
Okay, so it's not a thesaurus exercise.
Not at all. The inherent complexity of this level of communication resides in the structural architecture, specifically where you physically place the word in the sentence.
Placement, okay.
Yeah. Our source material provides a wonderfully stark contrast right out of the gate. It warns categorically against the incredibly common habit of tacking adverbs onto the very end of a sentence.
Oh, like as an afterthought.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It gives us a classic B1 level example. We changed the plan significantly.
Right. And to be fair, if I hear someone say, we changed the plan significantly, my ear doesn't catch an error. It sounds perfectly grammatical.
Oh, it is grammatical. Absolutely gets the point across.
It does get the point across, but I guess it severely lacks gravitas.
It does. It's functional, but it isn't compelling. Now, juxtapose that with the C1 level alternative provided in the text, we have significantly altered the trajectory of the project.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that hits different.
It really does. The strategic maneuver here is placing the adverb significantly between the subject and the main verb, or immediately following the auxiliary verb.
So we have significantly altered.
Right. By inserting it right into the structural heart of the sentence, you embed your stance into the action itself.
You force the listener to process the scale of the change before you even reveal what the change is.
Precisely. You are front-loading the impact.
I see. When you put it at the end, it's entirely an afterthought. To use a culinary analogy, placing the adverb at the end of the sentence is like, well, adding salt to a dish after it is already sitting on the dining table.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, it just sits on the surface. It doesn't integrate into the meal. But placing the adverb between the subject and the verb, saying, we have significantly altered, is like seasoning the dish while it's still on the stove.
The flavor bakes into the very foundation of the action. The adverb and the verb become inextricably linked.
Exactly. But let me push back on this just slightly. We are talking about shifting a single word, maybe 3 or 4 syllables earlier in a sentence.
Sure.
Does that truly alter the psychological reception of the news for the listener? I mean, are we overestimating the cognitive load of syntax? Because to me, change the plan significantly and significantly change the plan deliver the exact same data payload.
It's a completely valid skepticism. On a purely transcript-based level, sure, the data payload is identical, but human beings don't process spoken language like text on a screen.
Right, we hear it in real time.
Exactly. We process it temporally and we process it phonetically. Shifting that placement absolutely alters the psychological reception, and it primarily comes down to what we can call the phonetic runway.
The phonetic runway. Okay, I like that term. What does that mean in practice?
When you place the adverb early, we have significantly. You are creating a multisyllabic runway that forces you, the speaker, to slow your cadence.
Oh, you literally have to slow down.
Yes. It naturally elevates your pitch slightly and demands a microscopic pause. This creates phonetic anticipation. It allows you to land gracefully and impactfully on the verb altered.
Significantly altered. I hear it.
You command the listener's attention, you build tension, and then you resolve it with the action. When the adverb is at the end of the sentence, the energy of the sentence has already dissipated.
The voice tends to trail off.
Exactly. You've already given them the verb, so the modifier just fizzles out into the silence of the room.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. By forcing the word earlier, you are essentially tricking your own mouth into adopting a more authoritative cadence.
You literally cannot rush through "we have significantly altered" without stumbling. So it forces you to adopt the pacing of a leader.
Okay, so now that we've established this structural engine, the C1 placement strategy, we need to actually open up the toolbox itself.
Let's do it.
Our source material categorizes 50 highly specific adverbs into 5 distinct strategic functions. Let's start with the absolute bedrock of any business discussion.
Measuring the scale of our work.
Yes. The source gives us 10 scale markers, which are adverbs of degree and intensity. Looking at this list, significantly, substantially, marginally, profoundly, exceedingly, vastly, incrementally, consistently, radically, minimally, it's immediately clear that this is a masterclass in nuance.
It truly is. These are the instruments you employ to demonstrate how much or to what extent something is occurring.
And what is so vital at the C1 level is how carefully you must choose between near synonyms, right? To convey the exact physical, conceptual, or financial weight of a situation.
Absolutely. Let's examine the first pair, which are often mistakenly used interchangeably, significantly and substantially.
I am definitely guilty of treating those like exact synonyms.
Most people are. Now, both of these are infinitely superior to the elementary phrasing of a lot or very much, but they carry profoundly different connotations in a boardroom.
How so?
Well, significantly shares a root with the word sign. It relates to statistical importance, meaning, or indicating a trend. If you say, "we have significantly reduced server latency," it means the reduction matters.
It points to a clear signal amidst the noise of the data.
Precisely. It's a statistical marker.
So significantly is for the spreadsheet. It's about the math being undeniable. But substantially, as the source notes, implies a large, solid amount. It carries a tangible, almost physical weight, doesn't it?
It really does. Think about the word substance.
Right. If a CFO leans forward, drops a dossier on the table, and says costs have risen substantially, you don't just see a line on a graph moving up. You feel a heavy physical burden being placed on the company's ledger.
That's a visceral way to put it.
Even the phonetics of it, Substantially. The jaw drops on the stand. It sounds dense. It sounds like a concrete block.
That phonetic observation is spot on. It evokes physical substance. So your rule of thumb here: use significantly when you want to highlight a meaningful trend in the data, and use substantially when you want the room to feel the sheer physical mass of a change.
This is such a practical distinction. Okay, now let's look at the opposite end of the spectrum. We have the strategic down players, marginally and minimally.
Oh, these are perhaps the most essential adverbs in a leader's toolkit for damage control or risk mitigation.
Right, because if a massive project is delayed, walking into a room and saying the timeline has shifted instantly invites panic.
It sounds totally open-ended.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
saying the timeline has been marginally extended reframes the delay as a minor, highly manageable detail.
It acts as a linguistic shock absorber.
A shock absorber, yes. And what I love about marginally is that it allows you to maintain absolute honesty. You aren't hiding the fact that there is a delay,
Right. The data is still there.
but you are dictating the emotional response to that delay. You are looking at the board and implicitly saying, I am reporting this because I am thorough, but you do not need to panic.
You're managing their heart rate.
But let me ask you about minimally, because the source specifically mentions it is often used to describe risk. How does that contrast with marginally?
That's a great question. If I say a risk is marginal versus minimal, is there a functional difference? There is a vital difference. While marginally often applies to the delta of a change, a marginal increase in budget, a marginal decline in user engagement.
Right.
Minimally implies the absolute lowest possible threshold of existence, particularly concerning negative impacts.
So like the new software update will minimally disrupt our daily operations.
Exactly. It conveys that the disruption absolutely exists. You are managing expectations by acknowledging reality, but it reassures the stakeholder that the team has contained the disruption to its smallest possible iteration.
So marginally is about the size of a change, but minimally is about the containment of a threat. That's a brilliant distinction.
It saves a lot of headaches in client meetings, let me tell you.
I bet. Now, let's explore the extremes of the scale category. We have radically versus incrementally. This is a beautiful dichotomy because they represent two entirely different philosophies of business.
They really do. Radically is the language of the disruptor.
Right. The source defines it as being used for total transformations. We have radically redesigned the user interface. It implies a tearing down of the old infrastructure to build something entirely unprecedented.
It does. And while that level of transformation is thrilling in a Silicon Valley pitch deck, it is inherently terrifying to many traditional stakeholders.
Oh, for sure. Traditional banking does not want to be radical.
Exactly. Radically is a high-risk, high-reward adverb. It generates massive excitement, but it simultaneously generates anxiety about instability, downtime, and learning curves.
And this is exactly why incrementally is such a cornerstone of the C-suite lexicon. The source defines it as step-by-step, implying steady, controlled progress.
When a project leader says, we will incrementally roll out these new compliance measures, they are instantly lowering the heart rate of everyone in the room. What is so powerful about incrementally is that it inherently communicates safety, foresight, and systematic planning.
It is the linguistic equivalent of holding the handrail while walking down a steep flight of stairs.
That is a perfect image.
It provides the reassurance of continuous stability. If you say radically, you are asking them to jump off the staircase entirely.
And I hope they bought a parachute.
Right. I think the rule of thumb there is clear.
Yeah.
Use radically when you need to inspire vision, but use incrementally when you need to secure budget.
Oh, that's incredibly pragmatic. I love that.
Okay, moving down the list, we have a pair that deals with the concept of depth versus the concept of breadth. Profoundly and vastly.
Yes. The source notes that profoundly is used for things that affect the core or the very soul of a project or organization.
It feels incredibly heavy. This new legislation will profoundly alter our business model. It means the very DNA of the company is changing.
It carries an almost existential weight. You do not use profoundly lightly. It isn't just about tweaking numbers on a balance sheet. It's about altering fundamental nature. If a CEO says this merger will profoundly impact our corporate culture, they are signaling a deep psychological shift.
So it's not just a surface level change.
No, it's bedrock.
Okay.
Conversely, vastly, as in we have developed a vastly superior forecasting model, is purely comparative and expansive.
Okay, so it emphasizes a wide, almost unbridgeable gulf between two things. It is about area, not depth.
Precisely.
Profoundly is digging a deep well, and vastly is surveying a massive ocean.
That's a beautiful way to synthesize those two.
Which leaves us with the final pair in our scale markers: consistently and exceedingly. Now, these are frequently deployed in performance reviews, client feedback, or when praising a team's efforts.
Like, she consistently delivers high-quality work, or The engineering team was exceedingly thorough in their testing.
Exactly. But there is a subtle danger lurking in these words, isn't there?
Oh, a massive danger.
How do you deliver these adverbs of extreme praise without sounding sycophantic, insincere, or like you are just, blowing smoke? It feels like it requires a very specific vocal delivery to land correctly.
You're touching on a very real trap in professional communication. When you use an absolute marker of scale like exceedingly, which the source strictly notes suggests going far beyond normal expectations, the danger of sounding overly effusive or even unprofessional is high.
Right, if you rush through the word with a high-pitched, enthusiastic tone, oh, they were exceedingly helpful, it sounds
It
breathless.
sounds like you're fawning.
Yeah.
The key to mitigating that risk is to lean heavily into that C1 phonetic runway we discussed earlier.
Slowing down the cadence.
Exactly. If you consciously slow your cadence, lower your vocal pitch slightly, and clearly enunciate each syllable, the security audit was exceedingly thorough. You completely strip away the emotional hyperbole.
Wow. Okay, let me try that. Exceedingly thorough.
See? You replace breathless enthusiasm with objective, measured, almost clinical admiration.
You lower the pitch to make the praise sound like an empirical fact. It is an unyielding law of physics that she is exceedingly thorough. That is incredibly strategic.
It protects your authority while still delivering the praise.
So, measuring the size and scale of the work with these 10 markers is foundational, but that naturally transitions us to the next massive category. Measuring how much we did is one thing, but how do we describe the style of what we did?
Right. How do we articulate the specific manner and behavioral framework in which we operate?
This brings us to the how markers, the adverbs of manner and approach. The source gives us another 10 heavy hitters. Meticulously, pragmatically, strategically, systematically, collaboratively, proactively, independently, transparently, diligently, seamlessly.
These 10 adverbs are essentially the blueprint for the ideal modern professional.
They really are.
They don't describe the end product, they describe the intellectual and operational framework utilized to achieve that product. And choosing the right one is about diagnosing what your listener values most in that specific moment.
Let's start with a contrast that I find particularly evocative and one that I think a lot of people confuse. Meticulously versus systematically.
This is a great comparison.
When I see meticulously, which the source defines as extreme, painstaking attention to detail, I immediately picture a master Swiss watchmaker.
A watchmaker, yes.
I see someone hunched over a brightly lit workbench wearing a magnifying loupe, using microscopic tweezers to adjust gears that are barely visible to the naked eye. It implies a deeply personal, agonizing level of care, craftsmanship, and bespoke precision.
The human element is very strong there.
Exactly. But when I see systematically, which is defined as following a fixed, organized method, I don't picture a watchmaker at all.
What do you picture?
I picture Henry Ford's assembly line. I picture a massive factory floor running flawlessly. It is repeatable, it is scalable, and it is entirely devoid of individual idiosyncrasy.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Both are highly complementary ways to work, but they praise entirely different virtues.
Right, the watchmaker versus the assembly line.
It perfectly captures the inherent tension between these two concepts, and the C1 mastery comes from matching the adverb to the anxiety of your client or executive.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Sure. If you are pitching a boutique, highly sensitive, white glove service to a nervous client, say, migrating their legacy database to a new platform, you assure them that your engineers are working meticulously.
You are promising them the watchmaker?
Yes. You are telling them we are treating your data like a rare diamond. But if you are standing in front of the board and they want to know how you are going to process 10,000 customer support tickets a day without burning out the staff, you assure them the backlog is being systematically cleared.
You're promising them the assembly line.
Exactly. If you mix those up, if you promise a meticulous approach to 10,000 tickets, you sound incredibly inefficient.
You're telling them you're going to hand-carve 10,000 widgets. You've matched the wrong virtue to the problem.
Exactly. It's an instant loss of credibility.
Now, looking further down this list, I see two absolute titans of the modern corporate lexicon, words that are honestly borderline buzzwords. Proactively and seamlessly.
Oh, the twin pillars of LinkedIn.
Right. The source defines proactively as acting before a problem occurs, taking the initiative. And it defines seamlessly as working without any gaps, pauses, or visible effort. My question for you is, how do we rescue these words?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because they are used so ubiquitously in every corporate manifesto that they risk losing all their impact? How do we make them sound C1 again?
It's a ubiquitous problem. When a word is overused, it becomes acoustic white noise. To rescue them, to restore their C1 potency, you have to pair them with highly specific, unexpected, and concrete verbs.
Great verbs. Okay.
If a manager stands up and says, "Our team needs to work proactively this quarter," it means absolutely nothing. It's an empty platitude.
It's just a poster on a break room wall.
Exactly. But if an IT director says, "We have proactively quarantined the affected servers to prevent latency across the network," suddenly the adverb has massive teeth. It modifies a specific technical, measurable action. You rescue the abstract adverb by anchoring it to concrete reality.
I see. The adverb is only as strong as the verb it supports. If the verb is weak, the adverb just floats away. And I imagine the same rule applies to seamlessly.
Exactly the same. "We will seamlessly integrate the teams" is a cliche that nobody actually believes.
Because mergers are never seamless.
Never. But saying, "The legacy data will seamlessly migrate to the new cloud infrastructure with zero user downtime" uses the adverb to promise a highly specific, highly desirable technical outcome.
Right. And, considering the phonetics of seamlessly, it's entirely composed of soft sibilants and liquid consonants. Seamlessly.
Yes, there are no hard plosive stops.
The word itself physically mimics the lack of friction it describes. When delivered smoothly, it has a deeply hypnotic, reassuring effect on an anxious listener.
It really does. It sounds like slipping into a warm bath. It is the ultimate reassurance.
Moving down the list, we have the management style markers, collaboratively versus independently, working as a cohesive unit, sharing ideas, versus working without constant supervision or relying on others.
These seem fairly straightforward on the surface, but they signal so much about company culture and expectations, don't they?
They do, and they are incredibly useful for setting boundaries during onboarding or, project kickoffs.
Absolutely. But I want to direct our attention to 3 adverbs on this list that I think are philosophically much deeper.
Okay, which ones?
Transparently, pragmatically, and diligently.
Let's do it. The source defines transparently as being honest and open about processes and motives.
And in the modern business climate, particularly post-2020, transparency isn't just a communication style. It's a strategic imperative for crisis management and building institutional trust.
Yes, transparently has moved from a buzzword to a literal legal requirement in many cases. But I want to focus on pragmatically. The source defines this as being based on logic and what is practical rather than theoretical.
Yes.
I feel like this is the ultimate anchor adverb. When a meeting is devolving into pie-in-the-sky, ungrounded brainstorming, or conversely, when a room is descending into pure panic over a bad quarter.
Which happens more often than we'd like to admit.
Right. Being the person who stands up and says, "Let's look at our options pragmatically," instantly positions you as the smartest person in the room. You are claiming the high ground of logic over emotion.
It is the ultimate stabilizing maneuver. What makes pragmatically so effective is that it politely dismisses overly emotional or overly theoretical arguments without overtly attacking the people making them.
It doesn't say you're being irrational.
No. It simply states, "We are returning to reality now, and I am driving the bus."
I am driving the bus. I love that. But let me offer a bit of skepticism or perhaps pushback regarding the final word on this how list.
Okay, let's hear it.
Diligently.
Ah.
The source defines it as showing steady, earnest, and energetic effort. Now, if I am a senior manager and my director describes my year-long project as being diligently executed, part of me might feel a little insulted.
Really? Insulted, yeah.
Is praising someone for working diligently almost a backhanded compliment compared to, say, praising them for working strategically? Doesn't diligence just mean you worked hard, like a pack mule pulling a cart, whereas strategic means you worked smart?
That is a brilliant nuance to highlight, and it gets to the absolute core of why these vocabulary choices are so high stakes. You are entirely correct that in certain high-level leadership contexts, praising mere diligence can sound like you are praising raw effort in the absence of actual brilliance or vision.
Exactly.
If you call an executive diligent, it implicitly suggests they are a workhorse, not a visionary.
So we should avoid it.
Well, no, we shouldn't discard the word entirely. It is highly effective and necessary when directed at a process rather than a person.
A process.
Yes. The legal team diligently reviewed the 5,000-page compliance contract. In that context, diligence is the exact perfect virtue required.
That makes total sense. You don't want the legal team being creative or visionary with a compliance contract. You want steady, agonizing, energetic effort applied to a tedious task.
Exactly.
Okay, that clarifies it beautifully. Rule of thumb. You praise a process as diligent, but you praise a leader as strategic.
That is a perfect takeaway.
So we have mastered how to measure the scale of the work, and we've analyzed the vocabulary for describing the style and manner of the work. But describing work is, at its core, relatively objective. We're mostly dealing with facts.
Right.
Where this linguistic architecture gets truly complex, and honestly, where it gets really interesting, is when we start injecting our own subjective opinions into the discourse. We are moving into the opinion markers, the adverbs of stance and certainty, and this section is fundamentally about the fine art of disagreement.
It is, without a doubt, the most crucial analytical segment of our source material. These 10 adverbs, admittedly, arguably, presumably, undeniably, paradoxically, regrettably, inevitably, categorically, seemingly, fundamentally.
A heavy-hitting list.
They are the tools that allow you to disagree without being disagreeable. They allow you to challenge a deeply held assumption in the room, or pivot a hostile negotiation without triggering a defensive, combative response from your colleagues.
They are the diplomatic velvet glove over the iron fist. Let's dive straight into what I consider the absolute MVP of this entire 50-word list.
Which is...
Arguably.
Arguably is the best.
Right. The source states it is used when making a claim that others might debate, noting that it makes the speaker sound more humble. I think arguably is essentially the ultimate linguistic shield, isn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, let's say I walk into a marketing pitch and I state flatly, this is the most innovative campaign we have ever produced. I am throwing down a gauntlet. I am stating an opinion as a fact, which immediately invites the cynics in the room to try and tear me down.
You're giving them a target.
Exactly. But if I say, arguably, this is the most innovative campaign we've produced, I have made the exact same robust claim, but I have preemptively acknowledged that other opinions exist.
You've disarmed the opposition by inviting them to debate, which paradoxically makes them far less likely to attack.
It is a perfect shield.
But what makes it so brilliant is that it doubles as a weapon.
A weapon.
Yes. By using arguably, you shift your posture from authoritarian to intellectual.
Yeah.
You aren't forcing a fact down their throats. You are presenting a compelling thesis for their consideration.
That's a great distinction.
It is a highly sophisticated C1 method of projecting absolute confidence while maintaining approachability. You are essentially saying, I am so confident in this claim that I welcome your counterarguments, though I doubt you have any.
It's the ultimate intellectual flex disguised as humility.
Absolutely.
Now, how does that compare to the tactical use of admittedly? The source defines admittedly as being used when conceding a point or admitting a flaw. My question is, in a cutthroat corporate environment, how does voluntarily showing weakness become a strategic advantage?
Oh, the grace of conceding is one of the most powerful tools in a negotiation. Admittedly, is a phenomenal pivot tool.
A pivot tool. Walk me through that.
By volunteering a flaw before your opponent can point it out, you steal their ammunition. Imagine you are pitching an enterprise software solution, and you can see the client frowning at the exorbitant price tag.
The classic objection.
Right. If you wait for them to object, you are on the defensive. But if you take a breath and say, admittedly, the initial capital expenditure is higher than any of our competitors. However, the long-term ROI.
Oh, I see. By using admittedly, you own the flaw gracefully.
You prove to the client that you are objective, self-aware, and not trying to pull the wool over their eyes. And then, having established that trust, you seamlessly pivot to your counterargument. It completely deflates their objection because you have already agreed with them.
It is the linguistic equivalent of judo. You are using their own momentum against them. You yield the minor point to conquer the major point.
Exactly.
Now, let's examine regrettably. The source defines it simply as a professional way to say unfortunately. But the nuance runs so much deeper than that, doesn't it? Why is regrettably so vastly superior to unfortunately or sadly or, I'm sorry to say, in a C1 professional setting?
It comes down to the strategic removal of personal emotion and the establishment of institutional distance.
Institutional distance.
Yes. Sadly implies personal sorrow. It's too intimate. Unfortunately implies bad luck, a whimsy of fate, or a lack of control.
Like it's just the weather?
Right. But regrettably feels highly professional, institutional, and detached. It acknowledges that a negative outcome has occurred, but it absolutely refuses to accept personal moral culpability.
So if an HR director says, regrettably, we must terminate this contract, it sounds like an inevitable logical conclusion reached by a dispassionate committee.
Rather than a personal vendetta or a messy emotional decision.
It builds a firewall between the decision and the person delivering the decision. I don't want to fire you. The institution regrets to fire you. That's cold, but highly effective.
It is very effective.
Now let's contrast two incredibly powerful markers on this list: the absolute lockdown of categorically and the deeply skeptical assessment of seemingly.
Ooh, I love this contrast.
The source defines categorically as stating something absolutely and without exceptions. To me, using categorically is like pouring fast-drying concrete over a doorway.
Concrete again. You love the physical analogies today.
They work. I categorically deny these allegations. Or, we categorically refuse to lower our safety standards to meet this deadline. You are finalizing the architecture of the boundary. You are closing the door and sealing it shut.
It is the ultimate statement of unbending boundary. And notice the phonetic weight of it. Categorically. 6 syllables.
Yeah, that is a mouthful.
It is a massive, heavy word that takes time to say. You only use it when you are fully willing to walk away from the negotiating table or burn the bridge entirely.
So it's the nuclear option.
Pretty much. Contrast that heavy concrete with seemingly, which the source notes is used for things on the surface, implying there might be more underneath.
The market is seemingly stable.
Yes. This is the adverb of the shrewd, cautious analyst. It tells the listener, yes, the data looks good right now, but I am far too experienced to be fooled by surface-level appearances.
It inherently communicates a deeper, more rigorous level of observation.
And crucially, it protects your reputation if things go wrong.
Seemingly is the ultimate CYA word. Cover your assumptions.
Very diplomatic of you.
And speaking of intellectual rigor, we have to discuss paradoxically and fundamentally.
Yes, these are fantastic.
The source states paradoxically is used when something happens that is the exact opposite of what logic would dictate. Paradoxically, by reducing our product line and offering fewer choices, our overall sales volume actually increased.
Using this adverb is a massive intellectual flex.
It really is. It shows the room that you aren't just reading the top-line data, you are synthesizing unexpected patterns, identifying counterintuitive truths, and seeing the hidden gears of the machine.
It frames you as a visionary. Anyone can report that sales went up. It takes a C1 strategic thinker to point out the paradox of why they went up.
And then we have fundamentally, meaning at the most basic, essential level.
This is the adverb you deploy to tear down a complex, messy argument and return the room to first principles.
Give me a scenario for that.
Sure. If two departments are arguing over the minutia of a marketing budget, you cut through the noise by saying, fundamentally, this is not a question of marketing. It is a question of overall resource allocation.
Oh, wow. It sweeps away the distracting details and forces everyone to look at the bedrock issue.
It resets the entire premise of the meeting.
Okay, let's finish this section by looking at the predictive markers. Inevitably versus presumably, and the irrefutable, undeniably.
These are dangerous words if used incorrectly.
Right. The source notes that inevitably means something is absolutely certain to happen, whereas presumably is based on what is highly likely, though not 100% guaranteed.
This is pure reputation management.
How so?
Well, if you stand in front of the board and say, our main competitor will inevitably launch a rival product by Q3, you are staking your entire professional reputation on a certainty.
You are claiming to see the future.
Right. And if they don't launch, your forecasting ability is permanently called into question.
But if you say presumably they will launch a rival product, you are showing immense foresight and strategic planning, but you haven't locked yourself into an absolute prediction.
You've left yourself an escape hatch.
And finally, undeniably is reserved for facts so brutally clear they cannot be disputed. The user data undeniably points to a shift toward mobile platforms.
It's an aggressive word, clothes in objective clothing.
It essentially challenges anyone in the room to try and fight the math, knowing they will lose.
Exactly. So, having mastered how to control the tone, mitigate risk, and express our stance with these opinion markers, we must now pivot to the actual rhythm of the boardroom.
The rhythm.
Yes. Communication is not just about what you say or how you color it with opinion, but when things are occurring. The sequence of events.
This brings us to the tempo markers, the adverbs of frequency and time, the rhythm of business operations.
Time is money, but communicating time effectively is power.
So true. The source gives us periodically, concurrently, simultaneously, subsequently, prematurely, intermittently, invariably, expeditiously, retrospectively, promptly.
Another fantastic list.
Let's start by unpacking a subtle difference that I think trips up a huge percentage of professionals, even native speakers. The source defines both concurrently and simultaneously as things happening at the exact same time. But surely there is a nuanced difference in application. Why choose one over the other?
It's a very common area of confusion. While both do dictate that events are sharing the same temporal space, the duration and the nature of those events differ significantly.
Okay, lay it out for me.
Concurrently is almost exclusively used for parallel workflows occurring over an extended duration. The legal team is drafting the compliance contract concurrently with the engineering team's prototype development.
So they are running on parallel tracks over a period of weeks or months.
Right. Simultaneously, however, implies a single, highly coordinated, instantaneous event. The security alarm sounded simultaneously across all four sectors.
Ah, I love that. So, a rule of thumb. Concurrently is a long-distance marathon run side by side, whereas simultaneously is the synchronized split-second firing of a starting pistol.
That provides so much clarity.
Exactly. Now, let's map out the timeline with some of these other markers. We have looking back at past events, which is retrospectively, a very academic analytical word.
Retrospectively, we can see the market was already saturated before we launched.
We have acting too early, prematurely. We launched prematurely. And acting right away, promptly. We will address this server outage promptly. And then we have the sequence of events replacing the very basic juvenile word then, which is subsequently.
Oh, subsequently is absolutely vital for C1 coherence.
Why is this so much better than then?
Well, saying we initiated the reboot and then the system stabilized and then we ran the diagnostics, it sounds like a child recounting what they did at reset.
It lacks professional polish.
It does. We initiated the reboot. Subsequently, the system stabilized, establishes a mature, logical, inescapable chain of causality. It isn't just a list of events. It is a demonstration of cause and effect.
It sounds so much smarter. But let's contrast the rhythms of two very interesting words, intermittently and periodically.
This is a vital distinction.
The source defines intermittently as stopping and starting at irregular, unpredictable intervals, and periodically as occasionally, but at set, expected intervals.
It's the difference between chaos and control.
Yes. If I am an IT director and I report the main server is failing intermittently, I am reporting a nightmare scenario. I have no idea when the next crash is coming. The rhythm is chaotic.
But saying we will review the server logs periodically sounds like a highly controlled, scheduled, rational maintenance routine.
One word describes a symptom of a critical problem. The other word describes a management strategy.
Precisely. Now let's delve into a word that carries an immense amount of unspoken emotional baggage. Invariably.
Unspoken emotional baggage. That's intriguing.
The source defines it simply as every single time, without fail. But I'd argue that the true functional meaning of invariably is entirely dependent on the speaker's vocal delivery and body language.
Oh, absolutely. Invariably is a classic double-edged sword. If you deliver it with a bright tone, a lifted chin, and a smile, our design team invariably delivers stunning award-winning visuals. It is the highest possible form of praise. It means their excellence is so consistent, it is practically a law of physics.
Right.
But delivered with a heavy sigh, a drop in pitch, and a shake of the head, invariably the client changes their mind at the 11th hour. It communicates a sheer, bone-weary frustration.
It communicates that you are trapped in a Sisyphean loop of predictable disappointment.
Exactly. The word itself is mathematically objective, but the delivery makes it intensely subjective.
It is the subtle C1 communication of corporate fatigue.
Let me offer a piece of analysis on our next tempo marker, expeditiously. The source defines it as being done with speed and efficiency.
In a leadership context, commanding someone to do something expeditiously is a fascinating psychological play.
Why is it a play?
Well, if a manager walks up to a desk and says, I need this report done fast or do this quickly, it sounds frantic.
Yes, it sounds like you are just barking orders. It raises the blood pressure of everyone in earshot.
It induces a stress response. But if that same manager says, please process these compliance forms expeditiously, the core meaning is identical. Do it fast. But the packaging is infinitely more respectful.
Expeditiously sounds like a formal request between two high-level professionals.
It elevates the urgency from a state of panic to a state of strategic priority. It flatters the person being asked.
I love that. You are asking for speed, but framing it as professional efficiency. It is respectful urgency.
Exactly.
So now that we have the timing down, we have the tempo established, we need to aim the conversation with laser focus. We need to direct the room's attention to exactly what matters, filtering out the noise.
This brings us to our final category.
The target markers, adverbs of focus and precision, the final 10. Specifically, primarily, exclusively, predominantly, relatively, virtually, explicitly, implicitly, notably, collectively.
These adverbs are the surgical scalpels of the English language.
Scalpels. I like that.
They are used to narrow down exactly what you were talking about, cutting through broad generalizations and eliminating dangerous ambiguity.
Let's start with the grand divide of all corporate and political communication. Explicitly versus implicitly.
The heavyweights?
The source defines explicitly as stated clearly and in detail, leaving absolutely no room for confusion or doubt. And it defines implicitly as suggested, understood, but not plainly expressed.
Yes.
To use an analogy, explicitly is the map. It gives you the exact coordinates, the topography, the step-by-step directions. If the CEO explicitly forbids the use of unapproved AI tools, it is written in bold in the employee handbook.
Right, the map.
Implicitly, however, is the compass. It gives you a general sense of true north based on subtle cues, tone of voice, and unwritten rules.
The map versus the compass perfectly illustrates the divide. And building on that, I would argue that true C1 mastery is fundamentally about learning how to navigate that implicit space, especially in highly charged office politics.
Navigating the unwritten rules.
Exactly. A novice professional only understands what is stated explicitly. They only read the map. A master professional understands what the board is implicitly demanding without anyone ever saying a word. They read the compass.
And when you use these adverbs in conversation, you force the room to acknowledge these hidden layers. While the new policy doesn't explicitly ban remote work, the sudden cancellation of our Zoom licenses implicitly suggests leadership wants us back in the office.
You are bringing the unspoken subtext into the blinding light of day.
You are reading between the lines out loud. It's a very bold, powerful tool.
It really is.
Now, let's dissect group dynamics with collectively versus exclusively. Collectively looks at the group or the sum total as a single whole, while exclusively means only, involving absolutely no other factors or people.
These are essential for managing accountability, allocating praise, and sometimes allocating blame.
How do you use them to allocate blame?
They are the tools of a skilled manager. If a major Q4 project fails miserably, a true leader steps up to the microphone and says, collectively, we missed the mark.
By using collectively, the leader diffuses the blame across the sum total of the team.
Right, preventing any single junior engineer or marketing associate from being targeted and fired. It acts as a protective shield.
But conversely, if a single team member works weekends and secures a massive account,
The leader says, this victory belongs exclusively to Sarah.
you use the adverb to build an impenetrable wall around her achievement, ensuring nobody else, not even the manager, can siphon off the credit.
It is the precise surgical allocation of equity.
Now let's explore proportion and perspective. We have primarily, meaning mostly or the main reason, and predominantly, which is very similar, meaning mainly or having the greatest importance.
And then we have relatively, which is fascinating because it forces the listener to make a comparison.
Relatively is an indispensable tool for managing client expectations and mitigating sticker shock.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are pitching a massive cybersecurity overhaul and the client sees a seven-figure price tag, they are going to recoil. If you simply defend the price on its own merits, you are fighting an uphill battle.
You're just arguing about money at that point.
But if you calmly state, relatively speaking, this upfront investment is a fraction of the cost of a catastrophic system-wide data breach, you have completely altered their focal point.
You have forced the listener to compare the costs not to their current budget, but to an imagined apocalyptic scenario.
You have manipulated the scale of their perspective. Suddenly, seven figures looks like a bargain.
You are shifting the baseline. That is incredibly strategic.
And looking at virtually, the source defines it as almost entirely, as in virtually impossible. Why does saying virtually impossible sound so much more sophisticated and convincing than just saying almost impossible?
Because almost impossible sounds like a teenager trying to reach a high shelf, failing, and giving up.
Huh.
It sounds like a lack of effort or a subjective feeling of difficulty. Virtually impossible sounds like a data scientist who has run 10,000 simulations, calculated the statistical probabilities, and empirically determined that the likelihood of success approaches absolute zero.
It elevates a subjective statement of difficulty into an objective statement of scientific fact. It adds immense academic rigor to the phrase.
It really does.
Finally, we have specifically for pinpointing details, which is the ultimate antidote to vague, wandering corporate speak.
Yes.
And we have notably, which the source identifies as a tool to highlight a specific success. The team hit all their targets, notably exceeding the Q3 revenue projections by 20%,
It acts as a high-powered spotlight on a dark stage.
drawing everyone's eye to the exact specific achievement you want them to remember as they walk out the door.
It is the neon highlighter pen of spoken English.
Exactly. So we have mapped out all 50 adverbs. We have covered the markers of scale, the markers of manner, the markers of stance, the markers of tempo, and the markers of focus.
It's quite the toolbox.
It is. But memorizing a list of 50 words like a dictionary is not the same as wielding them in the heat of a boardroom battle.
Not at all.
We need to wrap up this lexicon and move to the ultimate test, putting it all together in high-stakes sentences. This brings us to our capstone.
The capstone.
The source material graciously provides us with 3 power sentences for practice. These sentences demonstrate the C1 strategy of placement, and they stack these different categories of adverbs to create highly specific, highly potent psychological effects.
This is where the theory we've discussed becomes actual, deployable practice.
Mm.
By deconstructing these sentences, we can understand the exact alchemy of C1 communication.
Let's explicitly repeat and deeply deconstruct the first power sentence. We need to proactively address these incrementally growing costs. I'll say it again. Listen to the rhythm. We need to proactively address these incrementally growing costs.
We are stacking a how marker proactively with a scale marker incrementally.
What is brilliant about this sentence is how it takes the absolute panic out of the underlying message.
Because the underlying message is we are bleeding money and we have a problem.
Exactly. If a manager runs into a room, slams a folder down, and yells, "Our costs are growing, we need to fix it now," they sound completely out of control. It induces widespread anxiety.
But by inserting the word incrementally, they frame the growing costs not as a sudden catastrophic explosion that caught everyone off guard, but as a slow, measurable, trekking phenomenon.
Yes. And then, by pairing it with proactively, placed right before the verb address, they frame themselves as the calm solution.
They aren't reacting to a crisis in a blind panic. They are anticipating a trend with calculated foresight.
We need to proactively address these incrementally growing costs. It is the sentence of a leader who is completely, unshakably in command of the situation.
Precisely. Let's examine the second power sentence. Arguably, this is the most meticulously planned launch we've ever had. Again, feel the phonetic weight. Arguably, this is the most meticulously planned launch we've ever had.
We are combining an opinion marker, arguably, with a how marker meticulously.
Yeah.
I look at this sentence, and I identify it as the ultimate corporate humble brag. It is a masterpiece of tone management.
How so?
Well, you are praising your team's intense watchmaker-like attention to detail by using meticulously. You are making the massive claim that this is the single best launch in company history.
But because you placed arguably right at the front gate of the sentence, acting as a buffer, you don't sound arrogant.
You sound objective. You leave room for healthy debate even though you are secretly confident that the data is so good nobody can actually debate it.
It is a phenomenal demonstration of absolute confidence wrapped in intellectual humility. You are inviting the board to review the planning fully knowing it is flawless.
And finally, the third power sentence. The two systems work concurrently to ensure data is seamlessly integrated. I repeat, the two systems work concurrently to ensure data is seamlessly integrated.
Here we see a tempo marker concurrently paired with a how marker seamlessly.
If I am a deeply anxious client or a non-technical CEO terrified of massive IT migration destroying my company's data, this is the ultimate gold standard reassurance sentence.
It hits all the right notes.
Because I don't need to understand the underlying Python code. I don't need to know how the API functions. What I hear is the word concurrently, which tells me, logically, there won't be a lag or a dangerous gap in the timeline.
And you hear the word seamlessly, which phonetically soothes you and practically tells you that you won't see any messy stitches, broken links, or downtime.
The adverbs do all the heavy lifting of soothing my anxieties without blinding me with technical jargon.
They absolutely do. And the actionable advice here for the listener is vital.
What's the advice?
Do not just read these sentences silently on a screen. You must practice speaking them out loud. Focus on the phonetic runway.
Right, slowing it down.
Place the emphasis heavily and deliberately on the adverbs. Proactively, incrementally, arguably, meticulously, concurrently, seamlessly. By physically training your mouth to hit these multisyllabic rhythms, you internalize the C1 cadence. You move from translating English in your head to speaking strategically in real time.
Okay, so what does this all mean? We have spent this deep dive unpacking the hidden mechanics, the psychology, and the vocabulary of strategic communication. If we synthesize everything we've covered today, the core takeaway is this. Moving from a functional English level to a C1 strategic level is not about using bigger, more esoteric words just to prove you swallowed a
Yeah,
thesaurus.
why not?
It is entirely about using precise tools, these specific adverbs, to control the color, the intensity, and the stance of the conversation.
It is about guiding the listener's emotional and intellectual reaction to the data without ever losing your own emotional discipline.
You aren't just presenting facts, you are the architect of the room's consensus.
That is an excellent synthesis.
Yeah.
And, well, I would like to leave the listener with a final thought to mull over, a provocative extrapolation of everything we have analyzed today.
Oh, lay it on us.
We have established that adverbs are the primary tools we use to color an action, to mitigate risk, to soften blows, and to reveal our stance. They are the fingerprints of human intention left on the raw data.
Right.
So what does it mean when you encounter a leader, a ruthless negotiator, or a politician who strips their speech entirely of adverbs, when they speak only in raw, unadorned nouns and verbs?
That's unsettling to think about.
Are they being perfectly, undeniably objective, presenting you with the unvarnished truth? Or are they, paradoxically, using the illusion of an X-ray machine to strategically hide their true agenda?
Wow.
If adverbs are the map and the compass that show us a speaker's intent, what does it mean when someone flatly refuses to show you either?
Oh, that is a chilling and fascinating thought to leave on. The strategic absence of color, the weaponization of objectivity. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We highly encourage you to take this list, practice the power sentences out loud, and most importantly, listen closely in your next high-stakes meeting.
Pay attention to the language.